4th.
AM Northwest goes to the beach tomorrow morning at 9.
From ABC News. This week with David Brinkley. Now from our Washington headquarters, here's David Brinkley.
Race relations in America. The polls show great improvement, but it does appear that many people give pollsters the answers they think polite and proper, and answers that are not necessarily true. And conflict continues. In New York this week, the mayor had to go on television and plead for racial peace and nonviolence. And New York is not the only big American city with a problem of racial hostility. It extends clear across the country. What can fair-minded, decent people do about it? We'll ask today's guests. David Dinkins, the mayor of New York City. Richard Thornburg, Attorney General of the United States. Eugene Mornell, head of the Los Angeles Human Relations Commission. And Ronald Takaki, professor of Asian American Studies at the University of California in Berkeley. Some background from our man Jack Smith, and our discussion here with George Will, Sam Donaldson, and Cokie Roberts, all here on our Sunday program. First, a little news since the Sunday morning papers. In Israel, near Tel Aviv, an Israeli, for no apparent reason, opened fire on a group of Arab workers and killed several of them. This set off a violent clash between Arabs and Israeli soldiers. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds.
Blood-stained clothes marked the spot where the shooting took place. Palestinians from the occupied territories had gathered here about 5 miles south of Tel Aviv, waiting for Israeli employers to select them for work. Witnesses said the gunman, a discharged Israeli soldier wearing an army uniform, halted a line of Palestinian cars, ordered their passengers out, and then opened fire using an Army-issue assault rifle. 7 were killed and at least 11 wounded in the single worst case of Israeli violence against Palestinians since the start of the uprising 30 months ago. Israeli officials said the shooting was an act of madness.
I can only express my deep, deep sorrow, I think, in the name of all of the people of Israel.
As grieving relatives arrived at nearby hospitals to hear the bad news, other Palestinian workers were sent back to the territories for their own protection. The sight of them returning to Gaza was enough to touch off major disturbances, in which at least 4 more Palestinians were killed in clashes with security forces trying to impose a curfew. The West Bank was no different. As word of the shooting spread, demonstrators confronted the army in running street battles. At least 2 Palestinians were killed as a result. Army reinforcements have now been sent in to restore order, but that goal will be hard to reach. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Tel Aviv.
The Romanians are voting today in their first free elections in 50 years. The early numbers show the interim president, Ion Iliescu, to be leading. We'll be back with all the rest of today's program in a moment.
This week with David Brinkley, brought to you by GE. From aircraft engines to appliances, we bring good things to life. And by Apple Computer, the power to be your best.
Yeah, give me a minute now. You've been staring out there all day. What are you doing? Testing. Testing what?
Computers. Trying to figure out which computer is the most powerful.
Well, that's easy. The one with the most memory, megahertz, MIPS, you know.
No, I don't think so. I think the most powerful computer is the one that people actually use.
Hi, Ken.
There's a computer with the power to change the way you look at computers. Macintosh. The power to be your best.
That's not really a fair comparison. People like using the Mac.
Some whites who strongly supported the civil rights movement have now given up, feeling they've done all they can and they see very little result. Some black leaders say their people cannot hope for fairness in this country ever, so they advocate some kind of separation of the races. It is not clear how. Even with all of the rhetoric we have heard over the years, it is still unclear how this problem can be solved. Before we ask our guests for their answers, here's some background information from Jack Smith. Jack?
I have a dream.
David, it was 27 years ago that Martin Luther King dreamed of a multiracial society.
Come on, nigga, let's go!
Did you see the hate in their faces? And one guy right behind me, a white male with a gun in my back, and said, run.
What kind of country are we living in? It's supposed to be America. People are supposed to get along, not like this.
27 years later, Dr. King's dream of racial tolerance remains just that, a dream.
Nowhere does that seem more true today than here in New York, where a recent series of incidents has exposed to full national view the deep racial divisions of this city.
The acquittal on murder charges Friday of Keith Mondello, one of the white defendants in the notorious Bensonhurst racial killing, touched off black anger. The verdict came a day after Joseph Fama, the alleged triggerman in the murder of black teenager Yusuf Hawkins last August, was found guilty of murder. Hawkins was attacked by a mob in the white suburb of Bensonhurst for no apparent reason other than the color of his skin. His killing by whites sparked protests by blacks that brought New York's already tense racial climate to a boil. And it's not only black against white. A 4-month-long black boycott of 2 Korean groceries in New York's Flatbush section has brought out the long-simmering antipathy between the two groups. Poor blacks and middle-class Asians. And last weekend, there was racial fighting between blacks and Vietnamese. All of this has challenged New York's Mayor David Dinkins, the city's first black mayor, to live up to his campaign image as a racial healer. And he has been speaking out.
If the bigots succeed in spreading their poison, it's nobody's fault but our own.
And what's true in New York is true across America today.
Let that be the message that you hear tonight.
In the South, the Klan has reemerged, and crimes of hate are on the increase, like last year's mail bombings that killed a federal judge and a civil rights lawyer. On the West Coast, in Los Angeles County, the authorities report an alarming rise in attacks on blacks, Jews, and gays. And just this weekend, at his birthplace in the Midwest, a memorial to Malcolm X was defaced. On the East Coast, there have been clashes between blacks and mainly white police like those in Virginia Beach last September. And even on college campuses, once in the vanguard of civil rights, racial friction is in the open.
Up here, not too long ago, there was fire bombings, serious assaults.
Sergeant William Johnston runs the Boston Police Community Disorders Unit and says the racial climate has turned ugly.
When I look what's happening in America, it's scary. It's almost a big extreme. Whites against blacks, blacks against Asians.
And I'm afraid that if we don't start moving now, what we've seen is only a foretaste of what will come. And that frightens me to death.
As a manifestation of concern, the president this week required the Justice Department, for the first time, to start keeping track of hate crime, but simultaneously signaled he'd veto new civil rights legislation designed to make it easier for blacks to prove job discrimination.
We seek civil rights legislation that is more effective, not less.
A confusing signal at a time when the whole texture of bigotry is changing.
Dago Wop, Guinea, garlic bread.
Gold teeth, gold chain wearing, fried chicken and biscuit eating monkey.
Little slanty-eyed, Mino-speaking American, own every fruit and vegetable stand in New York. Bagel and deluxe, banana, but he's Jew.
Yo! Hold up! Time out!
In the 1989 movie, Do the Right Thing, black producer Spike Lee's open display of racial hatred was accepted, even acclaimed, because it was said to reflect reality. There's more talk, too, of racial separatism today.
I will show you why no black man or woman in America should pay any taxes to a government that will not give us justice.
But Muslim leader Louis Farrakhan isn't alone anymore.
White people in this nation and the world have got to unite.
David Duke, a former Klan leader who was elected to the Louisiana legislature last year, is running for the U.S. Senate. And in New York, a college professor is even preaching white supremacy.
On average, blacks are significantly less intelligent than white.
Racism and bigotry are unabashedly flaunted all over the country today. Why? Some blame the Reagan administration for its apparent indifference to civil rights. But others point out that new minorities have been flooding the U.S. in record numbers, and at a time when living standards are stagnating, friction is inevitable.
The different groups, including minority groups, are now rubbing up against each other. They're competing with each other, and this is creating a multi-racial crisis in American society.
And this is happening at a time when whites feel they've done enough.
Very many well-meaning whites who were in many cases participated in the civil rights movement have lost patience and no longer feel the kind of obligation. There's been I think a dramatic decline in white guilt.
The old civil rights ethic, then, of reaching across racial boundaries seems to have been lost. Many Americans today appear to be dwelling on, even celebrating, ethnic and racial differences. And in a country as diverse as this, that can mean conflict. David?
Jack, thank you. Coming next, Eugene Mornell, director of the Los Angeles County Commission on Human Relations, and Ronald Takaki, professor of Asian American Studies at the University of California, Berkeley, and shortly the mayor of New York City, David Dinkins, and the Attorney General of the United States, Richard Thornburgh. In a moment.
Technology. All our mathematics, our computations. Somehow they all add up to moments that are beyond any calculation.
If you lose your Visa Gold Card, we'll be sure to find you, because Visa will deliver a new card and emergency cash right to you. Whether you're negotiating the powder in Zermatt, exploring the coral off Bermuda, or simply checking out some Puyi Fumé at the Hotel de la Bretagne, where you can't even check in with American Express. Visa Gold, it's everywhere you want to be.
This week on World News Tonight, the biggest polluter in America is the federal government. Why Uncle Sam doesn't face the same penalties for breaking the law. And spies in the workplace, paid to find out who's using drugs on the job.
If they point the finger at you, you lose your job.
Watch Peter Jennings on ABC's World News Tonight, this week.
Mr. Mornell and Professor Tanaki, one in Los Angeles, one in San Francisco, thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Happy to have you. Here in the studio with us are George Will and Sam Donaldson, both of ABC News. Now, the basic question for both of you. Can you see an end to racial conflict in this country, and how? Mr. Mornell first.
Yes, I think there'll be an end, but it certainly won't be within our lifetime. I think here in Los Angeles County, we see increasing numbers of people coming into the area, large numbers of different kinds of people. We see problems of race. We see problems of poverty. There's increasing conflict. I think we're working on the problems, and certainly we have less tension here than we do back east. And it's not just a black-white issue. It's a multicultural issue. But certainly the end won't be within our time.
Professor Tanaki?
Well, the name is Takaki, David. Yeah, I think I do see an end to racial conflict within my lifetime. I think in the 90s we have an opportunity to redefine America, to recognize the reality that Americans came originally from different shores, not just Europe, but also Asia, Africa, Latin America. We're becoming aware that what we need is multicultural literacy in this society. Also in the 90s, we will see the winding down of the Cold War. And this, I think, will allow us to revitalize the American economy, produce more jobs in manufacturing, And I think once we can overcome the economic crisis of our country, we can also then address the racial conflict in our society. I think the 90s will be a watershed in the history of the United States. I think we have an opportunity now to enter the 21st century. Although, as Mr. Mornell pointed out, the problems will be very severe, will be very difficult to address.
Professor Takaki, I take it then that you see the racial problem here as primarily economic?
Both cultural and economic. But I think so far we've been focusing mainly on the cultural dimensions of the crisis. And I think we have to realize that what's happening, say, within Bensonhurst or within Flatbush are economic problems. So there aren't jobs for people in these areas. So there's a rising level of frustration, a deepening despair. In the 60s, we had what was called rising expectations. Today, what we have, I think, are dashed dreams and dwindling hopes.
Mr. Mornell, talk about those dashed dreams and hopes. For several generations, the drive for improved race relations in the United States was to remove state-imposed or privately imposed impediments to advancement, discrimination in public housing, employment, and all the rest. We've struck down many barriers, and still blacks do not rise as fast and as numerously as they expected to. How much of this can be blamed still on white racism, and how much on problems of a social deficit of skills?
Well, I think they're both there, and in Los Angeles County and in Southern California generally, I think these problems of poverty, of unemployment, of health care, of lack of resources to deal with these problems still exist. But I think there's also a cultural issue, and I think there's conflict between different kinds of people. There's fear of the change in our population. There's fear on the part of older residents, whether they be white, black, Latino, what have you. We see the change significantly affecting the way in which we relate to each other. I don't see it solely in economic terms, although increasingly problems of poverty are affecting issues of race, of ethnicity, and the rest of it.
Let me ask you this. Suppose the skin color of everyone in the Los Angeles basin were suddenly white. How many of today's problems would change?
Well, I think the economic problems would remain. I think many of the cultural problems would disappear.
Like what?
Like hate crime. Presumably, the attacks upon blacks, upon Jews, upon Latinos, upon gays, on others, is going to change with the change in skin color that you're describing.
Is it not the case that hate crimes are trivial compared to the inter-black gang warfare in Los Angeles?
Well, in terms of numbers killed, in terms of violence, certainly that's true, but I think hate crime is the tip of the iceberg. Hate crime reflects the acting out by a few seriously disturbed or angry people who reflect the hostility of large numbers of people. I think it reflects prejudice that exists in the general population. I think it reflects bigotry that exists among all groups.
Mr. Takaki, Asian Americans in California particularly, and I'm thinking of the University of California policies, have had a problem of, you might say, excessive provocative success. I know that Asian Americans hate to be described as a model minority, but many people think of them as that. Is the success of the Asian American community at the heart, do you believe, of some of the tensions between black and Asian Americans?
I don't think it's at the heart, but I think it certainly is aggravating the problem in terms of relations between Asians and blacks. But I should point out to you, David, that Asian American success is a creation of the media. It's the media that has been celebrating our success, and it's the media that has been pitting Asian Americans as a model minority against blacks.
Excuse me a minute.
And so we ask the question, why is it that blacks resent Asian American success?
Excuse me a moment. The media is not responsible for the fact that such an extraordinary number of, say, new entrants in the University of California system are indeed Asian Americans. I mean, Asian Americans are succeeding.
Yeah, but what the media doesn't show is the number of Asian Americans who don't make it into the university, the number of Vietnamese young people who join gangs, for example, or the high rate of welfare dependency among Hmong, or the fact that 25% of the families living in New York Chinatown live below the poverty line. The media is not showing black America that we too are victims of racial oppression.
If I may interject here, I think the term Asian itself is a misnomer. I think if we're looking at the condition of different Asian groups, we're seeing a very different picture. Asians are Koreans and Chinese and Japanese, and Vietnamese, and I think each of those groups have different problems as they come to this country and as they stay here over a period of time. So I think we're lumping a large group of people as we lump Latinos or Hispanics together, and in fact, the problems are very different as we move from group to group.
Let me ask you both in the very short time remaining, whether after, as George has pointed out, 2 decades of government laws to try to correct these problems, we're at the point where we need more laws. Is there anything else the federal government ought to do in that connection?
Well, I think these laws have been laws addressing our legal rights as minorities. What we need are laws that will address our economic rights as Americans in this society. I think everybody should have a right to decent wages, to health care, and to a decent standard of living.
Yes, but these laws that you say address economic right usually have at their basis an attempt to correct a discrimination, a pattern of discrimination.
Yeah, but these laws have been designed mainly to assure us equality of opportunity, and what we're talking about as minorities in this country is equality of condition.
Professor Morale?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think one of the major problems is certainly economic. But here in this area, another major problem is people fearing the differences among us, having no sense of what a common good for this entire community means.
Yes, but if I may, my question was basically whether you think more laws, state, but I'm thinking more federal laws, are necessary.
No, I don't. I think that the enforcement of the existing laws combined with education, combined with some changes economically for some of the groups who need it most, would go a long way toward reducing the problem.
Mr. Mornell,
may I add one thing here?
Well, make it brief.
Yeah, we have laws against assault rifles, and I think what we need now are laws against racist assault.
All right. Professor Takaki, thank you. And Mr. Mornell, thank you very much for being with us. Pleasure to have you.
Yeah.
Coming next, the mayor of New York City, David Dinkins. And shortly, the Attorney General of the United States, Richard Thornburgh. In a moment.
Pure grain ethanol has replaced lead and gas. The air's a lot cleaner for everyone, especially kids. Cars are emitting less carbon monoxide, 25% or more, I've heard, which helps cut ozone pollution in our cities. And that detergent additive in ethanol keeps dirty gas from clogging fuel injectors. You don't need as much foreign oil either. And grain ethanol has opened new markets for American farmers. Cleaner lungs, and cars that run cleaner too. All from a homegrown product. Gas Pure Grain Ethanol gives us all a boost.
ADM, supermarket to the world.
This Week with David Brinkley will continue in a moment.
Monday on Good Morning America, a scientific first, test tube tigers.
Then later in the week, John Lithgow, Timothy Busfield, and Debbie Gibson here on Good Morning America.
You're a decision maker, sir.
You bet I am.
And you decided your favorite Blizzard flavor treat is Butterfinger candy.
Yes, I have.
How about Heath Bar?
Yes, I said that. Heath Bar is my favorite.
It is hard to choose.
Yes.
They're all so rich and thick you have to spoon them up. And on sale for just $1.39 each.
Oh?
Even this Oreo cookie.
Oreos, as I said. Yes.
And maybe you'd like this one.
Yes.
You've decided?
Yes.
Now on sale for just $1.39 each.
We treat you right.
Hi, Bob Lamphere for Beaverton Honda. We now have the largest inventory of Hondas in our history, which means you have the best selection ever. Starting with this Civic as low as $6,380. If you want to buy or lease, come see us for your new Honda. Trade-ins are always welcome here, no matter how old or new. We offer a huge selection, low prices, competitive financing, and great service. That's the Beaverton Honda advantage. You'll find it in downtown Beaverton.
Know the score. Watch Ron Carlson, Channel 2 Weekend Sports.
Mayor Dinkins in New York. Your Honor, we're happy to have you with us. Thanks for coming. Now, to begin with this, there was a poll in New York City sometime recently showing that about, I may have this number wrong, 80-odd% of the people believed electing a black mayor, African-American mayor, could improve racial relations substantially. Do you believe that? And if so, How are you going to do it?
Well, I believe that many people think that's the case. I think it is not realistic to expect that just because an African American becomes mayor, that a lot of our racial problems will disappear overnight. That's not so. There are things that I can do perhaps better than some, not simply because I'm an African American, but because of my general philosophy. One that says that we are not a melting pot, as is often stated, but rather we are what I refer to as a gorgeous mosaic, persons from varying ethnic backgrounds and religions that come together and that really provide our strength. Our strength is in our diversity. I'd like to say, lest I not get the opportunity later, Professor Takaki was tremendously impressive to me. I heard nothing that he said with which I disagreed. In fact, I think he stated the overall problem most eloquently. And my congratulations to him. I look forward to meeting him one day.
Why don't you invite him to New York?
He is hereby invited. We accept all the help we can get.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things the professor said was that the media is partly to blame for misrepresenting things. Now, you in New York have had a number of trials going on and disagreeable incidents, and the media there has, some people think, been inflammatory, including the fact that before the jury came in the Bensonhurst case, the Reverend Sharpton, a black activist of sorts, said, and his words were put in large headlines, that if there weren't a guilty verdict, there could be chaos and bloodshed and violence. Is the media part of the problem in New York?
Well, I have addressed that specific circumstance. I've made the observation that that particular newspaper did not serve us well by highlighting Al Sharpton on the front page with that comment to which you just referred. I can say, I'm pleased to say that following my address last Friday, a week ago, that newspaper, whether because of my comment or not, I don't know, but has altered its posture in that respect. As a matter of fact, your colleague, Sam Donaldson, was in New York, interviewed me, and made reference to the fact that I had been critiqued by, among others, Abe Rosenthal of the New York Times. And unfortunately, at that point, I had not read the article. I hope Sam takes a closer look at that article, and you will see an assessment of the media done by one of your number, who, for instance, observed that it was not logical, not rational for to the media to, after a major address by the mayor of the city of New York, prime time, carried by 5 television stations, to then rush to Al Sharpton to get his reaction to what I had said. I have no objection to getting his reaction, but the Abe Rosenthal likened it to the President of the United States making an address and then getting a response from the Speaker of the House of Representatives or some such. Well, I think they ought to ask Al Sharpton, but they ought to ask 10 or 12 others who have views different than his. Well, that's true, Mayor, but of course Al Sharpton is the person who's leading these marches. Now, there was a second defendant in the Bensonhurst case who has now been acquitted of the more serious charges of murder, and a march has already been held through Bensonhurst, and others have been promised. Do you think that's helpful? And if not, how can you stop it? Well, let me say what I have said to the local press in that regard. When marches were made in Bensonhurst immediately following the death of Yusef Hawkins last year, my posture was that, yes, they had a right to march. Others disagreed with me, but I thought they had a right to march because the purpose of the march then was to demonstrate that we who are African American have a right to go anywhere in our city, as indeed we do. I say now, today, in May, I've asked those who would now march to consider the purpose of the march and whether or not the purpose is to demonstrate that we have a right to go anywhere, and whether or not a march today now would be counterproductive. What do you think? Is it counterproductive? I question the validity of a march at this time. Not the right to march, in the same fashion that I support the right to boycott and to picket. But I think the boycott of the Korean grocery stores has gone on far too long and ought now cease. Well, you've been very definitive on the Korean grocery market boycott. But about the marches in Bentonhurst, you say you question whether it's counterproductive. If you think it is, why don't you just come right out and call for it to cease? Well, it's my choice of language, Sam. Let me be more clear then, if I may. I think that a march at this time is counterproductive because it just tends to provoke those in the Bensonhurst community, or some of those in the Bensonhurst community,
who hurl racial epithets, and which doesn't help the situation overall. I believe that what we need to do now is one, come together, and we're doing some things along those lines. 25,000 churches have been mailed letters by the Bishop Quick of the Council of Churches. We will be meeting with upwards of 1,000 different organizations that the city contracts with that deals with youth problems. We have a whole program going on now called The Spirit of New York, Respect and Unity. We will have a major rally on this coming Tuesday at 6 p.m. at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York. Now, when I say we, I mean labor, clergy, elected officials, community leaders. They are doing this in response to the call that I have made.
Your Honor, before we go, and our time is short, I want to quote another New York newspaper, not the one you were referring to a moment ago. And it says today that, I'm quoting, crime and a high dropout rate, about 50%, among young black persons constitute a quiet riot.
Well, as a matter of fact, I have used that language, quiet riot, myself in formal speeches over the last year or two. In short, given the absence of time, it's what Professor Takaki made reference to. We need job opportunity and educational opportunity that we're not supplying in sufficient quantity right now. I might add that our federal government could do much to assist us along these lines. If we can appropriate to expend some $325 to $500 billion over the next 30 years to bail out savings and loans, and have an inability to provide money for housing, for AIDS education, for the war against drugs, and on, it is no wonder that we're in some of the circumstances in which we find ourselves.
Your Honor, thank you. Thank you. Much. Pleasure to have you with us. We certainly wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Coming next, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States, including the civil rights laws, the Attorney General of the United States, Richard Thornburgh. In a moment.
In 1918, a small team of GE engineers set a new high-altitude record for an aircraft engine. What made it unusual was that they did it without an airplane. Back then, no plane could fly high enough to test the new turbo-supercharged engine. So they did the next best thing. They hauled it 14,000 feet up Pikes Peak. Several fits and starts, this remarkable new engine roared to life. And it is the same ingenuity and team spirit that has brought GE from America's first jet engine to the world's most advanced.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you look out the left side of the cabin, you'll see Pikes Peak.
Which proves when people work together, there's no telling to what heights they can soar.
Starting tonight, Shelley Long in her dramatic television debut. One woman, 22 different personalities. Based on a true story.
I've been lying in there for an hour trying to figure out how to kill him.
Voices Within, the lives of Trudy Chase tonight.
General, thanks for coming.
Morning, David.
Pleased to have you. We know you've been busy. This is no longer a conflict between black folks and white folks. There is now a whole range of others who are involved in our social stratum. It is predicted that sometime you and I, whites, will be minority in this country. What do you see in the future, this area?
Well, I think...
Is there anything government can do to make this a smooth changeover?
There is plenty that government can do, David. I think in the Department of Justice we have two fairly distinct roles. One of them is high profile. That's prosecution of hate crimes, sending a message that society won't tolerate violence and intimidation against persons because of their racial or ethnic or religious characteristics. And we've done that. We have twice as many FBI investigations going forward. We are prosecuting a record number of persons who engage in these acts. The other, from our point of view, is lower profile, and that is through our Community Relations Service offering the opportunity for mediation and conciliation in neighborhoods that are troubled, the Bensonhursts of this country, where men and women of goodwill who aspire to bringing reconciliation to their communities can find support from persons who are trained in this arena. Well, that's what the law can do, but I think you're asking far more than that.
Well, I know. Conciliation comes after the fact. How do we prevent these things from happening? You don't really know the answer to that, do you?
I certainly don't, but I can subscribe to what the President has identified and what was reinforced by the previous guests on your program, and that is to create a quality of life and an opportunity to participate in that quality of life in these United States that will cap the frustrations that obviously motivate some.
Mr. Attorney General, in that connection, the President seems to be backing away from the veto threat which you publicly made on the civil rights bill that the Senate is now considering. Do you think you were right to make that veto threat? And in fact, will the President be able to sign that bill?
I didn't make such a threat, Sam. I'm an advisor to the President, and I pursuant to his direction, have been monitoring the reaction to the Supreme Court cases that were decided last year. The President stated quite clearly what his markers are for a civil rights bill that he could
So you're
accept.
telling us that last month when you threatened that the President might veto that bill, you were doing exactly what he wanted you to do?
I think if you examine the remarks that he made last week that sketched the outlines of a bill that he would accept, you'll find them foursquare with the analysis that we made and transmitted to the Congress. And that is, number one, that this civil rights bill that comes to the President, which he wants to sign, if it contains appropriate recognition that there should be no quotas.
It doesn't call for quotas.
Well, that's a bone of contention, clearly.
Okay,
we've analyzed the remedies proposed to the Wards Cove case that clearly indicate that it calls for measuring a workforce on a statistical basis and nothing else. And our fear is, and our expectation is, that that would force employers into adopting quota systems in order to comply with the law without an opportunity to apply the kind of standards that any employer does in seeking a workforce.
Let me ask you another question on this. Isn't there a very strong political factor here? Vernon Jordan, the black lawyer who used to head the Urban League, said yesterday, I believe, that the President would lose this popularity that he now has with black Americans if he vetoes this bill.
There is a political factor here. The President enjoys a very high standing among black voters as well as all Americans, and the President expressed his fears to the groups that we met with last week that there's a desire on the part of some partisan opponents to send him a bad bill, to force him to veto the bill, to create an erroneous impression that he's anti-civil rights. He is pro-civil rights. He wants to sign a bill that embodies the remedial factors that we've recommended to him, but he will not, as he stated, sign a quota bill.
Well, now, the main author of this bill is Ted Kennedy, the prime mover of it, and now you talk about the remedial factors. You're trying to remedy decisions of the Supreme Court rendered, by and large, by the new conservative majority on that court. Why is a conservative Republican administration trying to correct a conservative Supreme Court? What have they done wrong?
Well, I think there are probably 5 decisions that prompted reconsideration of the court's direction. 2 of the remedies that we all agree upon are designed to revert to positions that the Reagan administration and the Department of Justice took before the Supreme Court and were ignored. So it's clear that what we're seeking is to follow a consistent line. One of those decisions, there's unanimity. Nobody wants to reverse the decision that threw out quotas, the Crozon case, Richmond case. And I think that's a very important and less appreciated characteristic of this dialogue that's taking place.
But as you know, the argument about this bill, the core argument is that it sets up incentives to drive employers to hire by numbers, to produce, to replicate the available workforce, to avoid ruinous litigation. Now, they made what to many people consider minimal cosmetic changes in the language, a substantial and demonstrable relationship to job requirements. And the Bush administration suddenly said, well, our objections are now minimal. Now, do you have any serious complaint with this bill or not?
I think we have a very serious complaint with the notion that quotas will be reintroduced indirectly into the fabric of American workforces.
You've read the language that got Senator Danforth and some others to say that fixes it, and I will now support it. Does it fix it?
No, it's a step in the right direction, but the basic flaw is that the present law, which says that you can use a statistical basis, a disparate impact it's called, plus an identification of some practice that's wrong to shift the burden of proof. The Kennedy-Hawkins bill would say all you need to show is the statistical basis and then the employer has to come forward and justify every single thing that he does in his hiring and promotion and training and other aspects of his
passing
employment.
the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Hubert Humphrey, Manuel Sellers, and others could not have been clearer that this was not written to countenance, let alone encourage, giving preference to one group over another. Is it not the case that we now have a pattern of preference for one group over another? It dates back to George Shultz, the Secretary of Labor in the Philadelphia Plan in a Republican administration. Don't we have a pattern now of practices in this country violating the letter and spirit of the 1964 Civil Rights Act?
A pattern which the Supreme Court recognized and declared to be unconstitutional in an opinion that's supported by everyone.
Except, of course, this administration, as is the case with past administrations, has been basically for affirmative action.
Affirmative action and quotas are two different things, Sam.
Well, that's two different things, but that is helping one group over another because of past discrimination.
No, I don't think so. I think affirmative action means searching out every opportunity to make sure that our diverse potential workforce has a chance
Let me
to
ask you,
compete
in the short time left, there's a Los Angeles Times story this morning, an interview with Donald Ayer, who's leaving as your deputy under very strained circumstances. And Ayer charges that last January you interfered with an investigation on one of your top aides, Robert Ross, that you tried to conceal the fact that Ross had failed a lie detector test, and you did not want him to be looked at by the Office of Professional Responsibility within the department.
Well, Mr. Ayer is sadly misinformed about the facts. Those facts have been reviewed by the FBI, by the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice, by the Solicitor General of the United States, and reported to leadership in the Congress. And I'm saddened that he feels that he has to lash out against his former colleagues, but there's no basis, in fact, for that kind of
So you
charge.
did not try to conceal the fact that Ross had failed a lie detector test on leaks?
Absolutely not. We conducted an investigation into leaks. There was no evidence that tied any person on my staff to the unauthorized disclosure of that information.
He failed a lie detector test. That's no evidence?
No, it isn't evidence of wrongdoing. Not in our courts of law, Sam.
And nor in your idea.
I'm being pushed, Sam. Sorry. Thank you. Thanks for being
Well,
with
I
us.
was
glad to be with you.
What?
I was pushing him. You were being pushed. Everyone's being
Sorry.
pushed this morning.
Well, our time is up anyway. The clock can be stopped. Thanks very much for being with us. Pleasure to have you. And this topic is not going away, so come back.
No, it isn't. Thank you, Dave.
Coming next, our discussion here, free and open. Everyone can say whatever he or she likes, but has to answer the mail. And joining us will be Cokie Roberts of ABC News. In a moment.
I mean, what do I need a computer for? I'm not an accountant.
Why should I be the company guinea pig?
Why do I need one now? I've done fine without one. Can you imagine me working on a computer?
Macintosh has the power to change your mind about computers. The power to be your best.
So I was wrong.
I say our cars are every bit as good as Japanese cars. You say, I'm from Missouri, prove it. Well, something just happened in California that shook even me. An independent testing company asked 100 Americans who would consider buying Japanese cars to compare a Dodge Spirit and Plymouth Acclaim to a Honda Accord. They drove them, made 33 separate comparisons, and 83 out of 100 judged Spirit and Acclaim superior overall to Honda Accord. You wanted proof? You got proof.
Freedom is all that matters. Freedom is everything.
There's a new light shining over Eastern Europe.
The Hungarians are waiting for a very long time.
A light of hope, joy, and most of all, a new light of freedom.
Everything is changing. It's wonderful.
It's a miracle.
I'm so happy.
And in this spirit, GE has entered into an historic partnership with a company called Tungsram, Hungary's leading lighting company.
Freedom is something that we have to work for very hard.
Like a dream. Beautiful dream.
At GE, we're proud to play even a small part in helping the Hungarian people build what promises to be a truly brilliant future.
I'm young again.
A field of stock car all-stars hit the track in an all-out sprint for their sport's biggest single-page
Lumberjacks. Defending champ Rusty Wallace, Dale Earnhardt, Bill Elliott, and more face the unique challenge that ends with a 20-lap dash for $200,000. Oldsmobile presents the Winston today on ABC.
Well, during the previous week, we have had, with great ceremony and many little sound statements to the cameras and a lot of coming and going and in and out of limousines at the White House, a summit on the subject of the budget and taxes. After all of this, it's not over yet, after all of this, anything coming out of it, Cokie?
Well, I think it'll be a long time before it's over, many months, and what's likely to come out of it is another sort of fix of a few taxes here, a few cuts there, or a lot of maneuvering with the books and probably setting the targets of when the budget has to be balanced later and later. I think we're now probably talking next millennium.
More fakery, in other words?
Well, some real stuff, because you can't get the whole package by fakery, but some fakery as well, because the political will is just not there. People don't feel like this deficit is in their pocketbooks.
That's right. I don't think there's a great urge in the country to do anything about it, and until there is, it won't be. There'll be some fix, but it'll be in the wrong places. They'll raise some revenue. And instead of raising it from the income tax, which is the fairest, broadest way to raise revenue, they're going to raise it through regressive taxation.
Liquor
well, the sin taxes, telephone, airline thing. And let me tell you what they want to do for oil. Instead of putting a gasoline tax on at the pump so people can feel it and say, my goodness, there's a problem here maybe, they want to put it on imports so that people don't see it directly. As long as that kind of hiding of the problem goes on, we're not going to have anything that's real.
We still have the cheapest gasoline of any industrial country in the world.
We should pay more for gasoline. It will help with the energy.
Well, we're not going to pay more for domestic gasoline as long as a Texan is chairman of the Finance Committee in the Senate, and as long as a Texan is sitting in the White House. That's not going to happen.
Cokie and you say, David, say it'll be a long time before it's over. It's over. Let me tell you. We know three things already. First of all, the alleged problem is to meet the so-called Gramm-Redmond law in quotes, target. No one ever quite complies with it, so it's not really a law.
Well, there are no criminal penalties.
In fact, they've already liberalized the targets. Once, they're going to move the target. Say, we can't hit that target, bring it closer, move it away, something or other. Second, they will decide not to include the real costs of the savings and loan bailout. Third, they will decide...
pretending that's not real money.
They will decide probably not to pass the Moynihan Amendment, which would, or even take Social Security off budget, which would give us at least truth in budgeting and reveal that the deficit is about $60 billion higher than they say it is. Fourth, they've already essentially agreed that whatever else they do, they won't cut the budget more than $50 billion, the deficit more than $50 billion, because to do so while the economy is soft might tip us into a recession. That's over.
Well, I hate to be a broken record, but you see...
It's all right, Sam. Go ahead.
Right. I know this one song. For 10 years, the American people were told by skillful politicians, beginning with Ronald Reagan, that you didn't have to pay for what you spent. We still want all those services because, folks, I see no political will in the country to cut large amounts of money from the budget.
No.
I mean, no. And yet we have now been taught we don't have to pay for it. Well, someone's got to pay for it.
Because what's left in the budget is programs that people actually care about. They care about Social Security and Medicare
you want
and those things.
to cut farm subsidies? No.
Defense, interest, and entitlements are 88% of the budget.
There's not much left.
I mean, even if Baker and Shevardnadze and Gorbachev and Bush and all those people disarm us tomorrow, I mean, if you abolished the Pentagon, you'd still have...
The argument is whether to cut 2 to 4% from the defense budget. There is no argument we should cut deeper.
One thing, though, about what you said, George, about the savings and loan question, there is a legitimate problem here, which is the year-by-year budgeting, so that the cost of the savings and loan bailout happens in one year, and the benefit of the sale of assets happens in another year, so that there is a sort of legitimate argument for taking it out of the process because of the annual nature of it, which leads to a whole series of questions about whether the budget process should be revamped. And what the White House, of course it's not, but what the White House is now saying is they want to revamp the process by having the Congress give them a line item veto. Now, the thought that the Democrats in Congress are going to say, we want taxes in exchange for a line item veto is the silliest thing I've ever heard.
I love the little statement.
You referred to the budget process. I think it would be nice if we had a budget process. We don't.
Well, the Democrats are not going to propose taxes, and when the president sort of put his big toe in the water just a little bit, Why, Lynn, Martin, and all the other Republican candidates running for office this year
with good reason. So did the Democratic
and
the Democratic Campaign Committee put out a big letter saying, you know, there go those Republicans again raising taxes.
George, go ahead.
Cookie, I have a theory, and it is that the line item veto would increase spending.
Absolutely.
It would work the following way. Everyone on Capitol would say, he's got a line item veto. I can put in the Joe Schmo federal building in my district, and he'll take it out. Trouble is, then he'd come to the Joe Schmo Capitol district building, and he'd say, I'll keep that in if you'll vote with me on foreign policy here or there.
Any president would use it that way.
In fact, it has increased spending in the states where it exists.
George,
Congress will never give up that power. It's not going to happen.
George, you were saying if George Bush and Shevardnadze and Baker and others disarmed us totally tomorrow morning somehow, we would still have a deficit, right? Is George Bush slow to reduce our military because he doesn't believe the threat has disappeared, or because he doesn't want to lose all of those jobs and have a depression in an election year when he's running?
Neither. I'm not convinced that he is being slow. As a matter of fact, it's hard to know the details of what's in this morning's paper about the arms talks, but it looks as though we feel a sense of urgency to sign arms control agreements now to lock in the Soviet Union, in the phrase of the Secretary of State, that I don't understand. They're in a position of extraordinary weakness, and we are making concessions at this point.
You've never understood the need to disarm from the standpoint of reducing nuclear weapons, George. And I think it's a good deal. It looks like we may have an arms deal, and I think all of the reduction we can get is a wonderful thing for both superpowers.
No matter any cut at any time for any purposes.
Well, obviously not. You want to drive an argument to the extreme when we're talking about the margins.
I was paraphrasing yours.
But it's interesting because it would have looked like a really good deal 6 months or a year ago, and now it's beginning to look somewhat modest given what's going on.
Yeah, but that's Cokie, because no one feels the threat that we felt, 6 months ago, a year ago, from the Soviet Union.
I find one of the most interesting things in these talks, from what we know about them, is that the Soviet Union is now in the absolutely 180-degree reverse position from where it has been, where throughout these talks before, we have been pressuring the Soviet Union on the immigration question and saying, let more people out. Now the Soviet Union is trying to pressure us on it and saying, let more of our people in, because they're getting flack from the Arab states about letting so many Jews into Israel.
All right. Now, other events have included a speech by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Rehnquist, who said that the law and the enforcement of the law on the death penalty has become, if I remember him rightly, said has become chaotic. If you were convicted of some terrible crime and sentenced to death, you can delay it with appeal after appeal after appeal, and in one case, I believe, 18 years it took for the sentence to be carried out. Is that right? 18 years. In any case, it goes on more or less forever. Should that be allowed to go on? He wanted to tighten up the law somehow.
No, I think it is absurd. Justice delayed is justice denied in this case. The social consensus in this country, the evolving standard of American decency is clear, the direction in which it is evolving. People support the death penalty. Juries are rendering, under very tight Supreme Court guidelines and other guidelines, death sentences. And the process is being used to throw sand in the gears of justice. And the Chief Justice simply says, look, the people have spoken. The court has said the death penalty is, within these guidelines, constitutional. Let us proceed.
Well, I'm sure there's some abuse of the procedures which now allow a number of appeals through various state as well as federal courts. But I hate to see us get to the point where we're going to go lickety-split to make certain these guys get electrocuted or the people on death row. Why not err on the side of allowing people every possibility to demonstrate legitimate appeal? Because we're not murderers, or we ought not to be murderers in this country, George. I, of course, am against the death penalty, so I think I should disclose that from the standpoint of my argument.
But you're for the enforcement of the law. The law says so-and-so should be executed.
Well, the law is about to change, and that's one of the things that I find interesting about this statement of the Chief Justice, because we are, this coming week in the Senate of the United States, about to debate this very issue, and there is, as you say, George, no disagreement. There is a Democratic bill to make it easier to inflict the death penalty and a Republican bill to make it easier to inflict the death penalty. The thing that I do find interesting, however, is that the Chief Justice of the United States has, in effect, lobbied for one of those bills over another. I'm not sure that's entirely appropriate.
What I really long to hear is the little colloquy in the Justices' chambers between Rehnquist and Brother Brennan. Now, Brennan keeps saying in his opposition to the death penalty that the evolving standard of decency decency, the United States says that there should not be capital punishment, that it's cruel and unusual. How does Justice Brennan explain the fact that there are Democratic and Republican bills supporting it?
Well, we will invite him to come here and explain it, but he won't come, I'll tell you now.
He says they're both wrong.
Our time is up. We'll be back with a few words about presidential politics and why nobody is doing anything in a moment.
I noticed a great number of returns, rejects on an altimeter that we are getting from a supplier. So I scheduled a trip to California to talk with the supplier, and I asked him how he would feel if we reset it here, and he was delighted. It certainly wasn't just an isolated thing of wanting to reset the altimeter here, but resetting time saved us a valuable 2.5 months.
People with the power to do a better job build a better product. McDonnell Douglas, a company of leaders.
Today, nearly every city in America faces the same dilemma. Landfills choked with garbage and rapidly running out of space. To combat the problem, the city of Urbana, Illinois has turned to composting. Leaves, grass clippings, and other yard wastes are collected separately from the rest of the garbage, then broken down into organic nutrients. This can extend the life of the landfill by 20%. But what's even more remarkable are these biodegradable trash bags made with a special cornstarch additive, which starts breaking down the plastic in just a matter of months. As a result, these bags can be added directly to the compost pile, which has cut the cost of Urbana's operation by 30%. Composting with these biodegradable bags could soon be commonplace throughout America. For the sake of the environment, that day can't come fast enough. ADM, supermarket to the world.
Finally, it's only a little over a year and a half until the presidential primaries and caucuses begin, whether we're ready or not. And normally by this time we'd already have 6 or 8 politicians visiting New Hampshire and Iowa, kissing babies, shaking hands at the shoeshine parlor, speaking at the Rotary Club, roaring up and down the highways in rented cars, stopping in small towns, visiting the feed stores, eating at Mom's Cafe, and spending the nights in plastic motels. That's American presidential politics, early, close to the bone, and what we see every 4 years. Why don't we see it now? Why is nobody doing anything? Because no Democrat sees any way to beat George Bush in 1992. He's far ahead in the polls, around a 70% approval rating, and he carefully nurses and protects his lead every day. Walter Mondale gave 3 years of his life trying to be president. 3 years on airplanes, 3 years of heartburn from the cafes, 3 years in motels on lumpy mattresses. And for what? He carried his home state in the District of Columbia. Who wants to do that now? Nobody. For all of us, until next week, thank you.
This Week with David Brinkley, brought to you by ADM, supermarket to the world, and by GE. From plastics to financial services, we bring good things to life. If you wish a printed transcript of this or any other This Week with David Brinkley broadcast, please send $4 to This Week with David Brinkley, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007. Today, join Forrest Sawyer for ABC's World News Sunday for the day's top stories.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
I do love them.
Should we look around? Deceit, murder, lying.
It was a setup all the way.
The ground opened up.
You are live in Red Square.
Un estúpido.
I'm Diane Sawyer.
And I'm Sam Donaldson.
Isn't it time you watch
their time and their audience with biased diatribes? Finally, an observation on elections from Dr. Fred Decker of Corvallis, who reminds us that even the most conscientious voter has no way to enforce on winning candidates a penalty for having presented false information or promises. Why not require all winners to post bonds, guaranteeing their promises, and require all measures to carry such bonds before they can go on the ballot? Your opinion does count. Please write.